Welcome to Case Files, the human factor. We are going to unpack and explore human behavior. And human behavior is fascinating. We're going to look at trauma, victimology, and I'm going to use all of my expertise over the last 25 years to really give you the gift of understanding human behavior and the fascination we've got with psychopathology, crime, victimology, criminal justice, mental health, forensics and statutory cases. And with that, I will, on my own and with the assistance of some of my guest speakers, really give you insight in what the human factor means in our lives and our daily existence. Welcome to the human factor. We are going to talk today about human dignity and respect. And I thought about this topic because it was brought to my attention by numerous of my colleagues and clients and patients at the practice that feels that there's a problem in society where they do not feel that there's dignity, that they don't feel that their views are respected or that they are being treated in an ill way. And obviously there comes the concept of exploitation as well. So when someone feels that they are being exploited in various ways that we can talk about today, they feel that they're losing a sense of themselves. They feel that they are being disrespected. And it feels that the dignity that we have as a human person feels that it disappears. And per the Constitution and the UN Convention, we all as humans have got the right to dignity. But if you look at sort of human behavior, there's a lot of human behavior in life that takes away from dignity as a person. And that is why it is so important that there is conversation about how do we as humans treat each other in a disrespectful way. We ill-treat people because of our behavior, our sense of self, our sense of what we feel we should have, and how we take away from the other person's life experience, and how we start to disrespect each other because of our own selfish ways at times. Now, if we look at a few examples, people take away from a person's dignity through abusive practices. So any form of abuse, if that may be emotional abuse or psychological abuse with words, or if that is by where people gaslight other people because they have got their own entrenched views and they try and confuse another person, that kind of psychological or emotional abuse can create, and it does create, a disrespect and it creates an imbalance of power, and that would lose a person's, or you feel devalued, and your dignity with regards to yourself or within sort of a socialization in a concept where people are together, a community, you feel that there is perhaps sort of a loss of dignity. And if we look at further exploitation practices, for example, sexual exploitation, human trafficking, those kind of concepts, there's a lot of sort of inhumane behavior where people feel that they are losing a sense of who they are, a sense of being a human. They get degraded, that loses that relationship that you have with dignity and respect. If we look at sort of modern concepts as, for example, financial abuse, may that be within an intimate partner or in a workplace, financial abuse and the disrespect that goes with that, and the courtesy of treating someone with dignity also gets lost because of human behavior and that human factor that I am perhaps more deserving than you, and I take away from you what you deserve, what you respect. So a lot of these concepts has got to do with control, with a balance of power, and how do we treat each other in a good way that we feel well respected and well balanced and feel that there's a kindness still in society. Now, often I hear in meetings that people feel that life has become unkind. Life has become sort of an experience where people feel that they are being devalued and exploited. May that be in their own personal lives, in the workplace, within friendships. And that is why it is so important that we look at ourselves and we think, what am I doing? What is the relationship with the inner self, with myself? And how do I project that to the world, that I'm still a kind person that treats other people with the necessary respect that they deserve? Because I do think in life that has been lost in translation through people's stress levels that have been increased, through worries that has increased, through how much pressure people experience in society. And they lose themselves and their kindness through exploitive practices, pressures of life, mental health struggles, or abusive practices that also takes from that being just a kind, respectful individual to others. And obviously in this conversation, it is important to look at what is your own value system, what is your own belief system. And by that, you can consider obviously, how you've been parented, how you've been socialized throughout your life. If you look, for example, at your own maybe religious or spiritual belief systems, what is your belief system? Because often that determines your value system. And if you look at your belief system and your value system, you'll start looking at how do you treat others? Is that with respect, or is that in an exploitive manner to self-serve? So very important things for people to think of. Now, interestingly enough, in consultation with individuals, especially when I do clinical work, but also in a forensic capacity, if you ask the person, but what is your belief system? What is your value system? People fall over their words, they stumble, because it's concepts that they haven't thought about. And I would like people, after watching this episode on dignity and respect, is to really start thinking and unpacking and really processing, but what are you all about? What kind of relationship do you have with yourself? And what kind of relationship do you have with others? Because in that you will have clarity and you will develop a sense of compassion and care and kindness towards yourself, but perhaps to others. Now, obviously, life is complicated. So the more things that happens to us, the more that transference of negativity or trauma or suspiciousness develops through life. And that sometimes can make people quite unkind at times, or you can lose a sense of empathy. And we need to look at what does the influence of the world do to us as people, and how do we navigate that to still be close to who we are as people, and also to try and consider and navigate, but how do we project that onto other people? Because that is how we engineer our own lives, but also engineer the lives of others. Now, for me, we all draw from experiences of life. We draw from our mentors. We draw from people that have add value to our life. And depending on where you've grown up, depending on sort of your heritage, depending on people and the effect and the roles that different people play in your life, that is also how you would develop your relationship with respect and dignity. Now, for me, that is an African woman that lives in Australia. A big part of my life is formed by my heritage. And in African culture, there is nearly no one, and worldwide, that don't know of late President Mandela, that was sort of a freedom fighter. And obviously that is a key role player in sort of how apartheid has changed in an African context, and a world leader for peace and for democracy. And a lot of his teachings was on human dignity and on how do we respect each other and how do we create a platform of respecting each other above sort of what you can just see in a person's skin color, for example. So definitely for me, a mentor and a big role player in my life when I look at my own behavior of what governs my own relationship and my own teachings with other people with regards to respect and dignity. And I do a lot of work in, teaching people of how to have good relationships with people and how to respect one another and look at considering people's human rights. And I do a lot of discussions about what is a person's human right? How does a person's dignity look if we consider someone's right as an individual within the law, but also within mental health, within sort of just a general conversation when people have got relationships with each other and what governs that. And I definitely draw some of my information from the teachings of late President Nelson Mandela in Africa. And if you listen to other sort of people that have known Nelson Mandela, they speak very highly about the kind of character he was, about his belief system. And I want to share some of that today that you can consider for yourself. What is your relationship with dignity of how you treat yourself, but also how you treat the people in your circle, perhaps your family, perhaps sort of individuals that are close to you, but then also the wider community of what is your role in that. Because the reality in life is, if we all do our little part and we start to respect each other in a way that is kind and courteous, we are going to start making micro changes that will change and will lead into macro changes that will change how people worldwide look at each other and will lead to shifting the platforms of the wars that we see, the gruesome attacks on people, how the gender crimes that we see. So there's a lot of change that we can facilitate just through small steps in treating each other with more respect. Now, I do know that every person that is listening to this podcast have had some form of experience where they feel ill-treated and disrespected by another person, because human nature can be quite cruel. We as humans can be quite cruel, and we treat each other in times, especially if we've been hurt, with cruelty. And we need to look at that and unpack that to try and make sense of it, that we can do better every day in our actions, our behavior, and our speech of how do we interact with other people. Now, in my own lived experience and in my own life, I've been treated very disrespectfully. I've been sort of in situations where I've experienced racism, where I've experienced people judging me or listening to me and making comments about myself, who I am as a person, where I come from, my gender, sort of my role in society. And very important that we decide, how do we respond to that? And yes, at times we can let ourselves down because we feel that someone else has hurt us, or they have abused us, or they've rejected us as people. But it is how we respond to that that really matters. The response shows the character. And I always say to people, the closer you can stay in line with who you are and stay in character, the better it is for us as people. And if that is rooted and grounded in sort of a good character of values of respect and dignity, we know that we are doing the right thing every day as far as what we can to look at human dignity and peace. And we transfer that and project that into our conversations. And that is when we feel that we have arrived in life. Peace is a very important concept in our lives. We want to feel peaceful. We don't want to feel harassed. We don't want to feel hurt. And if we can all strive for a better relationship with peace in ourselves and with people around us, that will definitely give us the stepping stones of facilitating change in life. So a very important conversation that, we see politicians at times have. We've seen in politics as well that people just say what they want to say, whatever they want to say. There's not a lot of boundaries these days. People think that, freedom of expression means that you can say cruel things, you can say whatever you want to. I do think it's a very important conversation for humans to start thinking, what do they say? What are the words that they are putting out there? And how far away, what is the distance between what comes out of your mouth and what you are spreading? Because often what we hear people are spreading these days are a lot of inhumane things that creates a lot of exploitation in thought, in discussions, and just blatantly in what people put out there and the unwanted gifts that they give you just through words and how that affects people. So I want really for us all to consider, how do we have more of a respectful relationship with ourselves, and how do we have more of a respectful relationship with people around us, because that will facilitate some peaceful conversations and some peace. And a very important topic, if we look at the wars and the war zones around us of what is happening, there is not a lot of peace in society anymore on a micro and macro level. And we need to facilitate the change. And the first start is to look at sort of our human dignity, of how we connect with that concept. What does that mean for us? And we can't analyze it if we don't really sit and think about it. So I urge people, and I really want people to think, and every person that walks through my door, that is often a conversation, is what is your relationship with dignity? What is your relationship with dignity and human dignity in your relationships, in your workplace, in your sense of self, in your family? And try and unpack that, because that will make a difference in society. I want us to look just at a piece, and I've got this book here. So it's the Conversations with Myself that is in Nelson Mandela's book. And I do think it's very relevant. Later this month, I am going to stay in late President Nelson Mandela's home in Houghton in South Africa. And I have got a conference there, a discussion of people that we are going to sit at a unity table where people are going to have a conversation about peace and respect and how we can facilitate change. So very important that I share this information with you for you to think, to reflect, and to critically analyze your own conversation with yourself. And what role do you play in society? May that be if you are in an authoritative role, or in a role of power, or if you are, no matter what role you are, if you're a teacher, if you are a lecturer, if you are someone that works, just a general work in a service delivery industry, how do you treat people around you? Because that tells us a lot about who you are as a person. And you need to unpack that, because that will give you yourself a sense of, how do I develop good mental health? How do I develop sort of a transference in treating other people's mental health with respect? And that role that you can play in society is critical of how things can change around you in your own circle and in circles around you. It's got a ripple effect. So if we look, and I'm going to read a little piece for you just about sort of how Nelson Mandela sort of experienced, because obviously for people that don't know, he was in prison for a very long time, and how that experience molded him. And we'll talk about that. So just in the starting of this book, of Nelson Mandela, The Conversations with Myself. And I want to just, perhaps before I start reading, just comment on that title, is how often do you have a conversation with yourself? You know, when I ask people that, and I say that in a not a narcissistic way or in a sort of a delusional way, but it's very important for people to have a conversation with the self, to have an inner dialogue, because if your inner dialogue is fractured, we make mistakes, we do things that is out of character. So very important to take the point of developing an inner dialogue, a conversation with the self that you can see, but what is happening in the inner psyche? What is happening within yourself? Because often what happens within yourself, you project to others and the world. And that sort of makes a big difference of if you're a kind person, a cruel person, or how you project, just what is the inner dialogue. So very important to have a conversation with the self, as what Nelson Mandela had and what this book is about. So if I do this reading, it says the cell, talking about sort of the cell that he was imprisoned in, is an ideal place to learn to know yourself, to search realistically and regularly the process of your own mind and feelings. So I want you to think about that powerful sentence. And I'm going to read this again. I want you to try and imagine if you were imprisoned, if you were in a cell just with your own thoughts, what would your thoughts look like? What would you start to unpack and what would you think about? And think about now what I've discussed before with regards to self-respect, with regards to respect to others, and about human dignity. So if in a cell is an ideal place to learn to know yourself, to search realistically and regularly the process of your own mind and feelings. In judging our progress as individuals, we tend to concentrate on external factors, such as one's social position, influence and popularity, wealth, and a standard of education. And as what you can see here, often that is the case. We look externally at stuff, at material things, as education, and we carry that. And we should be looking internally, not always externally. So these are, of course, important in measuring one's success in material matters. And it is perfectly understandable if many people exert themselves mainly to achieve all these. But internal factors may be even more crucial in assessing one's development as a human being. And I really need us to consider that very carefully. What are you considering when you think about yourself as being a human being? And how are you facilitating peace on earth as a human being? Are you creating more chaos? Are you creating more misery around you? Are you creating more war within, just in your family, within your system, within your workplace, or on a larger front in the world? Are you a war-driven person? Or are you a peacemaker? All very important things to consider if you look at one's development as a human being. Honesty, sincerity, simplicity, humility, pure generosity, absence of vanity, readiness to serve others, qualities which are within easy reach of every soul, are the foundation of one's spiritual life. Now think about conversations that you have with your own self or that you have with other people. How often are you talking about these concepts? How often are you talking about honesty? How often are you talking about sincerity, simplicity, humility, pure generosity, absence of vanity? Think about how people's relationship with vanity has escalated since we've got social media. All of the self-images, the constant photography of ourselves, the selfies that we take, all of these videos, that people take where it's all self-indulgent. Have people lost the absence, or have they become too vain? Think about that, the absence of vanity, just in your own daily life experience of what you're doing. The readiness to serve others. Are you willing to serve others? Are you willing to give a part of yourself, a part of your soul, to be a good human being on earth? So think about these qualities of generosity, because that are very important if you look at the inner dialogue of your own spiritual self, your own soul. So development in matters of this nature is inconceivable without serious introspection, without knowing yourself, your weaknesses, and your mistakes. So I want you to look at sort of your own experience of how often do you introspect? How often do you sit with yourself and you think about yourself and your role in society? Because if you respect yourself and you think about these things and there's introspection on these topics and you develop more of a kindness, you are going to start treating people with dignity, with respect. And that is very important for us as humans to start doing more so, especially in the world that we are living in currently. At least, if for nothing else, the cell gives you the opportunity to look daily into your entire conduct, to overcome the bad and develop whatever is good in you. Regular meditation, say about 15 minutes a day before you turn in, can be very fruitful in this regard. You may find it difficult at first to pinpoint the negative features in your life, but the 10th attempt may yield rich rewards. Never forget that a saint is a sinner who keeps on trying. So these are very important words that I want us to consider when we start looking at our own relationship with respect, our own relationship with dignity, because that is the platform that we need to start sort of emerging from if we start looking at the relationships we have with other people. So I want you to start thinking about what I've discussed today in this podcast, and to think, what is your relationship with other people around you? How kind are you? How courteous are you? Or are you angry? Are you enraged with things that has happened and you're just constantly projecting that into your life cycle? We call it a life script. What is your life script looking like? Because I want us all to consider, perhaps we need to do slight adjustments. Perhaps we have to re-engineer. We have to navigate a path forwards where we can live in peace and we can look at respecting each other and serving each other with the dignity and the human dignity we deserve. It's a human right that we all need. And that is part of the human factor, is we need to look at what factors, what in life do humans attract to? What do we need to survive in life? What do we need to thrive in life? And human dignity and respect is definitely one of those factors that we need to consider. So very important information to have an inner dialogue, to have an inner conversation with ourselves, that we can transfer that into society as being sort of improved human people, and look at sort of the human dignity that we show others, to not act in exploitive manners towards each other, because that can be very harmful and distressing for people around us, but also on a world platform. It creates wars, it creates sort of people that do not live in peace. And we need to look at what role do we play in society and start to take responsibility. Thank you for listening to The Human Factor and for considering your role in having a respectful relationship and in acting with human dignity.